Good.
Okay, first off, oh, holy cow. If you're here looking for the alarm talk, there were some scheduling snafus. It's not actually in here. It's a stable talk. I'm not sure if it's already occurred or not. You'll have to check the most recent schedule. I'm Casey. Most of you have seen me running around here with camera gear. I'm the staff photographer. I'm also actually a tech guy by trade. So when we get to the end of this and you look at the, content I provided, and you'll think, well, he's not a very good tech guy either. I hope he's a better photographer. A little bit about me, mostly because most of you don't know me. A little bit of history here. Started this as a hobby in the Army. Got good at it as a hobby. They made it a job. I got good as a job. A friend of mine said, hey, you're pretty good at that. How about you get a real job and make some real money? I said, okay, I'm in. I've done pen testing, forensics, a little bit of everything. Jack of all trades, master of absolutely nothing. Up front, some important disclaimers. This is my information. This has no reflection on my employer. Let's get that crystal clear up front. Nothing here is, shall we say, live environment type things that are, trying to phrase this properly. There's nothing in here that is a legitimate live network or security posture that this was based on. How's that?
It's all lies?
It's all lies.
Okay.
All lies. It's a work of fiction. Again, really, not my employer, just me. My employer does not endorse this in any way, shape, or form for use in real-world application. All right, so here's my objectives. I want to get my porn. I want to get it at work. I don't want to get caught. I'm cheap. I don't know if I mentioned this, I was in the Army. I was in the Army for quite some time. Not a lot of savings there, so not a lot of funds to dip into to spend money on things to get my porn. So let's see what we've got for some options here. That 20 years ago, that was porn, dude. Yeah, you guys remember that? I see some people that should remember that.
That's more like 30 years ago.
Yeah, all right. Maybe 30. So what am I trying to get? ASCII? Sure, I can get that everywhere. That would pass most filters too, because, oh yeah, it's text. Photos, video, that's a little more complicated. I might get tagged for that. What kind of tech am I going to use to get this stuff? Can I use it for something other than just getting my porn? That'd be good. It'd be really good. I got some concerns though. ASCII, it was good 20 years-ish, plus. It's not so good anymore. I'm looking more for the high-res stuff, I'm a photo guy, just saying. So, here's some potential options for actually gathering the content, right? Some real issues with it, though. It's pretty easy to filter this stuff out. Lots of places have defenses against this stuff. They don't like it on their network. I'm not sure why. Maybe the bottom bullet here, which I will say there was a research project about 10 years ago when I first came out of the Army that I got put on in my first corporate gig ever. So I stood up my LimeWire and my Kazaa and my eMule and eDonkey and all of my clients, pointed them all at my shared drive to store the data I was pulling down from my research project. And surprisingly, when the network admin comes to you and says, "You're tearing up the bandwidth," it's like, "Yeah, I know, I'm doing research." It's like, "On what?" I'm like, "Well, I'm working on this project." It's like, "Why are you pulling down all this porn? What are you talking about?" So we start looking at the stuff that's coming in over these peer-to-peer, clients that I had not actually configured very well, surprisingly. I did mention research topic, right? So it wasn't too bad until you started getting into things with fur. Yeah, it got kind of ugly there. That was okay. It was, at least it wasn't illegal per se. But when you started getting into the younger generation, it really got hairy really quickly, because now my employer is storing this content on their servers. And oh yeah, that's a felony offense for each and every single image. So there was some really quick cleanup, lots of write-ups, some self-reporting, some phone calls, a whole bunch of horror that I never want to go through again. So again, this is probably not the best mechanism for getting your porn at work. So now we move into, the next little bit. Some more mechanisms that look like they might be viable for me to get porn at work. Proxies, anonymizers, yeah, that's pretty good. You don't own them though, first off. If you want the expensive features, such as drag and drop or something other than HTTP, you got to pay them. Again, cheap. So I started looking at maybe some remote access mechanisms to get to my house, because I can get to my own collection. That's good. And if I can get to my own collection, I can get to my own box. I can even search from there, and it won't go through my corporate filters and things. But again, we're back to, it's going to cost money. They're browser-based. They're clumsy. They're slow. Who uses log me in or go to my PC or anything like that? It's slow as dog shit. I mean, really. Try streaming video over that. It's just not. It's not viable.
That's why you're a picture guy.
Well, that's part of the reason. It's part of the reason. Or RDP and VNC over the internet. Well, that cuts down on the bandwidth issues, right? Because that's much more streamlined, and that's really a good idea, isn't it? Sure. Let's go that route. Some of the defenses, I'm up against in my office. I got to get around all this stuff without getting caught, and this is, just some of it. They're monitoring the network. They're filtering ingress and egress. They're doing all kinds of stuff to try and prevent me from getting my porn. It's my lunchtime. I can do what I want with it, right? Content filters, WebSense, things like that. It's just not good. Tracking connections. So you start looking at things. And, Carlos Perez has done some really excellent research on DNS exploitation. I don't know if you saw his talk. Maybe he's already doing this. Or Dan Kaminsky.
Probably Dan.
Probably Dan. But after Carlos' talk, I got to talk to him first. I can deploy my own VPN terminator to get to my box. That's an idea. Now if I can VPN out of my environment and into my home, that opens up a whole world of things without all the overhead. A little bit of overhead for the VPN. But now you start looking at costs. Again, cheap. Let's go open source. I need free stuff. I got mouths to feed and porn to buy. So you start looking at the costs on the Juniper and the Cisco and all the other stuff. It's prohibitive for a guy like me that has no cash. Porn and camera gear, just saying. And yes, they do go hand in hand, but that's another story. So I'm already running a firewall at home. Can I leverage it to do what I want to do? Let's look at this. Yes, my firewall does support VPN tech. OpenVPN, built right in. They also do IPsec, LTTP, lots of different methods I can use. Now, you start looking at the options on the firewall. Some are easier, some are harder. As it turns out, well, I'll get to that in a minute. So I get the firewall. I figure out I can get to it from OpenVPN. How am I going to always be able to get to it? I don't have a static IP. Again, I'm cheap. I'm on a dynamic IP scheme through my provider, well, we've got the dynamic DNS for the win. If anybody's using dynamic DNS, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's fantastic when it works. So I've got a high bandwidth link at the house. I've got an old box. I throw pfSense on it. Anybody familiar with pfSense? I see a couple hands. All right. It's a fantastic platform. It is absolutely awesome. Turns out it supports porn really well. And you can virtualize the thing too. So if you want to, you can throw it into a virtual environment and run a virtual firewall. Me, I'm old-fashioned. I like to have a hardware firewall. If something goes wrong, I swap out the box. I feel much better about that than knowing that somebody can compromise the host my firewall's running on and do whatever they want to me. So I'll stick with my hardware. So we get to the firewall piece of it, and pfSense supports a lot of things. It supports timed rule sets, so I can set up when I can get to my porn and when I can't. I can set up captive portals so that if somebody else wants to get to my porn, I can give them a login. Dynamic DNS, fantastic. Always anywhere in the world, get to the box. VPN, of course, we've already talked about that. It's IPsec, LTTP, OpenVPN. I don't know who's ever used any of those technologies or had to actually deploy them. Remember the old days of building it out and having to go in and write your own config files and configure everything. pfSense makes that a little bit easier. It's really, really nice. And, oh yeah, key, it's free. Doesn't cost me a cent. So here, what do I implement? I implement my OpenVPN, of course. It looks like SSL traffic, so let's think about this for a second. If you're going to run a VPN, 443 is not your default port for any VPN because, oh yeah, it's used for SSL web traffic. However, if you're sitting behind a corporate firewall that only likes to see 80 and 443 traversing it, what happens when you channel this over the top of it? It looks like any other SSL traffic, right? Mostly. Not exactly the same, but close enough that it will pass most firewalls. So now you've got your VPN stood up and you're tunneling it over the SSL, you're good, right? Because if you put it on another port, it may not be blocked, but it'll definitely be detectable. Different options that you can set up. I could do site-to-site from my desktop at work. That's awesome. Probably not the best idea, but a great idea. Road Warrior, fantastic. I can set it up and put the client on my box at work. I can take it with me wherever I want to go. Put it on my laptop, get to it from wherever. It's fantastic. And I can turn off split tunneling. So, does everybody in the room know what split tunneling is? I'm assuming you all do, but okay. Because the last thing you want to do is set your porn search running only to discover you haven't turned off split tunneling and you're now searching through your corporate environment. That will raise some bells and whistles and flags. Not that I would know. But it does have some disadvantages. It's not truly portable. You can't just run it from a thumb drive. You can build an OS on a thumb drive and boot from that and run it that way, but that's completely different issue when you're running off of box that's already running. Dynamic DNS providers are sometimes blocked. Lots of corporations don't like to see dynamic DNS traffic, so they block it at their perimeter. I would do the same if I had a corporation. Somebody want to give me one? Oh, we lost one. See ya. So, with all of this in play, how do you detect that from a corporate perspective? How do you protect against this? What are your options? What are some things that you can do? Wow, I'm running really ahead of schedule on this. So, yeah, quit laughing because you did it last year at Derby. I know.
I was at least drunk.
Yes, I know. All right, now I've lost my train of thought because of you. I blame you. Yes, I do know some of the people in the room from other places.
How do we detect it at work?
Oh, that's where we were going. So the first thing really is you've got to understand your infrastructure. You've got to know what you've got. You've got to know what your traffic is supposed to look like. If you know you're supposed to have, I don't know, three gigs of HTTPS traffic that traverses roughly in a day, some guy that's streaming video over his SSL VPN should stand out. There should be a spike somewhere in your data. Even the worst SIM in the world will help you see that if you've properly employed it. Log everything, net flow. It really is very useful. It's very good for finding things like this, for finding anomalies. But you have to actually look at your log data. How many of you are logging everything? Not anybody. Oh, a couple hands. All right. How many of you are really looking at what you're logging? Yeah, see, and there's the problem. Nobody's doing that. There's usually way too much data for one guy or two guys to review. There's tools out there to help you filter that and get it down to a manageable, useful volume. If you're looking for things like this, you're going to need to, because if you're logging and not looking at your data, it's not going to do you any good at all. Or if you don't understand the data you're looking at, it's also a potential issue. You may see an anomaly but not really recognize it as an anomaly. So, blocking services, ingress and egress. That would definitely shut down this type of a situation. If you're denying the services, so somebody tries to stand up their VPN connection, they haven't configured it to run over SSL, they're trying to use the standard default ports. If you're blocking them, they're not getting out. If they're trying to tunnel something over SSH, and you're blocking SSH outbound because there's no business reason for it. Again, blocking ports and services, very important. Tuning firewalls. So we talked a little bit about, or briefly mentioned anyway, that SSL traffic from OpenVPN will pass most firewalls. If you tune your firewalls, you can tune them such that your HTTPS web traffic will flow properly, mostly, unless it's broken. But you can deny your SSL VPN connections out because it does look slightly different. You've got to find the right flags and settings to set that. A little difficult. Deep packet inspection firewalls are good for that. Sidewinder G2s, I can speak from experience, can be tuned very nicely. I will also say it does break a lot of things. Because not everybody implements SSL the right way. Lots of web apps try to use SSL and they get implemented poorly, so you got to kind of watch what you're doing if you've got a need for things like web apps that are doing SSL, so that you don't break your own infrastructure. But if you tune it right, you could stop me from getting my OpenVPN connection to go out. Black, white, gray lists, those are pretty self-explanatory. They've been around since about, the dawn of computing. Deny your DNS traffic. If you don't let him use dynamic DNS, then he's got to buy a static IP. That'll stop me because I'm cheap. I'm not buying a static IP. It's just not going to happen. I'd much rather spend that money on, good porn. The problem with trying to block your dynamic DNS is it's hard. How many people are keeping track of the dynamic providers out there? There's new ones coming up every month. Every month. Sometimes quicker than that. So you build your list to block the ones that you know of, and I find one that you don't know about yet. I'm good, right? Well, I'm good for at least a week until you find that one and you block it. So that's an ongoing struggle if you're really trying to block them all. content monitors, WebSense, things like that, commercial products. Those will catch anything I'm trying to bring in, hopefully. Although if I'm coming over my VPN link, probably not. But you will see it if I'm not smart enough to stand up a VPN. Tor. Tor works. Tor's good, but traceable, right? It's hard, but it can be done. So that may be an option as well. That was actually supposed to be a couple slides back, but I forgot to put it on there.
Latency with Tor.
I'm sorry?
You have latency with Tor also.
Yes, there is latency with Tor, so you're back to photos only, no video. But in a pinch, it'll do. You can build a PowerPoint slideshow. It's not as good as a full video.
Slideshow Tor.
Old school.
Flipbook.
Flipbook, yes. Good call.
We got a new product.
All right, thanks. So essentially, there's a lot of things. There are many other ways that I haven't even touched on here, and part of the problem is I had to do some editing to this because I did mention the disclaimers up front, right? There was some content in here that had to come out, so it's a little weaker than I thought it was, and I'm way farther ahead of schedule than I had planned to be. So I guess with that said, I'd like you all to understand there is no such thing as a stupid question, only stupid people. And on that, I will close. Are there any questions? Seriously, I'm lots of things in my head when I put this together that didn't make it out somehow during the presentation, which is why we're 30 minutes ahead of schedule. So if there are any questions, I'm certainly open to discussion on this. A point that I meant to bring up during the talk when we were talking about it was IPsec. IPsec is also a potentially viable option, but if anybody's configured it, there are some real issues with getting IPsec configured to deny split tunneling. IPsec does not like to have that feature turned off for some reason. Yep, I've chased them all out. Question?
OpenVPN, you prefer layer 2 or layer 3?
That's a good question. Layer 2 is I prefer layer 2. I'm a network guy. I like to stay at the network layer as much as I can. Is that okay? Fair enough. Back to OpenVPN, one of the things that I, again, meant to point out, in the old days you had to edit the config, you had to do it by hand, you had to build it by hand. pfSense actually will package all of that together for you. It will build your config file, you just tell it what options you want. It will package it up with a client that you can download to your box. You can set it up to do certificates. It's pretty phenomenal for building your VPNs. It will push you out over an SSL VPN very nicely, and oh yeah, it's still free. Question in the back.
How well does pfSense work with embedded systems?
How well does it work with embedded systems? pfSense works, okay, let's put this into perspective. pfSense by itself, without any of the add-ons or plugins, just the basic firewall package, has an embedded platform that is downloadable and installable. It runs very well. The problem you run into with the embedded systems is the hardware is usually fairly limited. I used to run monowall on an old Socrates box, if anybody's familiar with those technologies. Yes, because you bought it from me. And it was great. When I upgraded to pfSense, I had to upgrade to a full-blown box because for me to buy an embedded system powerful enough to run pfSense with all of the plugins I wanted to run, such as inline snort, which should have been in here too, But anyway, in order to get to that level, I needed to buy a really powerful embedded box, and I'm cheap. I had old boxes laying around, so I just switched over to an old PC box and stood it up that way. It works really well. It's been in use for years. Throw enough RAM at it, it's great. So pfSense will run very well on an embedded platform, but there are some potential limitations there. Question?
You mentioned NetFlow data being very useful to collecting log. What commercial or open source tools to get at that, make that into useful data? Have you seen the like?
And I don't have an answer on open source tools for that, or commercial even. That's something I was using probably 5 years ago. I was in a gig with the military. I did mention my military background. I was just pre-retirement, and the Army had a bunch of systems that we were using that were fairly custom. I got out of that particular arena when I retired and moved into pen testing and other areas, and have not gone in depth into looking at NetFlow data recently. So I know there are a lot of options out there. How good they are, I couldn't tell you. Yes?
This is you or anybody in the room. Have any recommendations for a good dynamic DNS provider? The ones I've worked with are just kind of unreliable, kind of shitty, or they just go out of business.
They're all pretty much that way. They stand up, they go away, they stand up, they go away. The one I use is Dynamic DNS. I've been using it for a very long time. Yeah, No IP is another one that's well regarded.
She's blocked by most web properties.
Yes.
Have you heard of DIM DNS, UIM DNS? I've been with them for years.
Yeah, that's the one I was just talking about. Yeah, I've been using that since like 1989 or not that long, but
Question.
a long time.
When you're blocking dynamic DNS, do you catch CNAMEs that are pointed to the dynamic DNS name? Or I guess the CNAME has to go out and look it up, so it's probably redundant.
Sounds like you answered your own question.
Yeah.
If you're not, you should.
Yeah.
Could you utilize a 6 addressing scheme versus 4? Because that would kind of provide.
That's a fine question. Actually, part of what I didn't get to in the research for this was looking at using 6 addressing schemes.
Because most firewalls don't have rules that actually block you.
Agreed.
Last stuff straight to it.
Yeah. Normally 6 will pass right through most infrastructure at this point because security infrastructure hasn't caught up to for 6 as it is for 4. So, yeah, I suspect that 6 will work beautifully, but I have not fully researched that.
So I can do my point.
Yes, you should be able to get your point over 6. I believe pfSense supports 6 too, but I don't have it enabled. So,
Which build of pfSense are you running? Are you running the stable or the beta?
I run the beta at home use. I like bleeding edge. How bad can I fuck myself?
Leads for better stories.
Well, it is point related.
Yes. Any other questions?
How large is your ASCII porn stash?
Your dot
Compressed or uncompressed? It's about a meg in a zip file.
Wow. So like a terabyte, okay.
Is there any place I could find an archive of the old .Mac bitmap porn stuff, like from like 1986?
Archive team.
Yes. Ask Jason Scott.
Jason Scott, archive team. I'm not joking.
No, really.
Yeah. Archive team rules.
Yep. All right, so we've still got plenty of time. I can stand here and answer questions if there's any more. Or you guys can go have a beer and say that was lame. Questions?
Yes, can I get the URL location?
I can't hear
He
you.
wants to log in for your porn. Connect to your porn.
Oh, certainly. We got a special hookup just for you.
Live demos?
Just click OK when it adds. Yeah.
What tweaking did you find that, which settings did you find work better?
I don't know that he's seen the picture. Those are not connected. In my case, I had.
So,